Welcome to another Pretty Good Parent.
Yeah.
Or do you like better? This is an all new Pretty Good Parent.
Smartless.
I stole that from Smartless, Jeff.
Yeah.
I stole it.
Yeah, some of our friends.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Last time on the
Well.
Pretty Good Parent. First of all, how are you doing today, Josh?
Oh,
You look great. If you can't see
good.
him in real life, he's wearing a button up. He looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
I feel nice. I feel really good. Good sleep. Going on vacation tonight. So there's a little bit of excitement, a little bit of like pre-packing list jitters of like, did I get it all?
yeah.
But it's good. I'm feeling really good. How about you?
I mean, I think it's going to be a good vacation because you look good today. I feel great. It's Friday. We often film these on Friday.
Yeah.
Fridays are nice.
Best day.
So, yeah. Last time, I believe we talked about the mindful parent,
Yeah.
which you and I like to geek out about mindfulness. I have a confession to make. I'm not perfect in my mindful parenting skills yet.
Surprise.
Yeah, surprise. So you might have to remind me real quick on the best techniques, but let me just give you a little example of how I fail at mindfulness.
Settle in, listener.
Sometimes my kids just be kids and I'm tired and cranky.
Yeah.
And then I yell and then it's just a real shit show and it's just classic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was about last night around, let's say 9 o'clock. Bedtime's usually 8:30. So I was just, but it all went out the door. So
all the tips, all
yeah,
the skills,
all the tips, all the skills.
reverted to caveman dad.
Yeah. So why don't you give me a quick little breakdown? What skills could I have used on the mindful parent?
Well, a few things stand out. One, you said you were tired.
Yeah.
When we're tired, our brain doesn't function as quickly, as smoothly, or as creatively. And so you kind of went into it maybe already in a hole. I would say if we could rewind, which we are, and redo it, at some point in the evening, if you were checking in with yourself, you would have recognized, oh, I'm tired.
Right.
Oh, what happens when I'm tired? Bedtime routine is harder. I snap. I'm more irritable. I'm less patient. I need to set it up differently. If I'm already low on fuel, I can't go into bedtime routine without a plan because their kids are going to be kids and they're tired too. And so their ability to follow rules is compromised. So I need to have a strategy of how I'm going to keep myself chill. Otherwise, unconsciously, I'll probably snap and then say something I regret. So it starts earlier in the evening. You can't make yourself catch up on sleep in the evening time, obviously, but you can acknowledge that you're sleepy, which leads to irritability.
Yeah.
So a plan of, do I tag team with Libby? Do I try to set this up differently where I don't feel like I'm standing over them just ready to get mad? You could do breathing exercises. You could say, I have a harder time getting mad at them when I have my hand on their shoulder. Connecting with them. And so while they're like moving slowly or irrationally through their bedtime routine, instead of standing over or at the doorway, hands on
arms crossed,
or the dad fists on the hip,
Superman dad,
Superman,
angry Superman dad,
or arms crossed like, you little shits, I'm in control here.
Yeah.
Instead, like literally, if you got on a knee, okay, and said, I'm here to help you guys. Make sure you take care of your bodies and make sure you get in bed on time.
Yeah.
You're already saying nice words that like tell the rest of your body, like, things are fine. There's not a problem here. But if you're thinking, I need to get to bed, and you're delaying it, and that's what you're focused on, you're going to react just like all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So using your body position, doing a breathing exercise, touching their shoulder, their head, their neck. It's just harder to get mad at someone when you're actually having some sort of affection. And then keep saying, pick a phrase that you can reset to. Like, I want to be helpful. What would be helpful right now? Versus, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Why aren't you doing it? That's dumb. We say that, but like, what are you really going to ask them a question? Like, why aren't they doing it? Like, that doesn't matter. They just need to do it. Just move forward and get them to do it as quickly as possible without your anxiety injecting into it. So, take a knee versus stand at the door. put your hand on them to reset yourself, or pick a phrase. I'm here to help. How can I help right now? What's the next thing you need to get doing? How can I help you with that?
Mhm.
They're tired. Also, their functioning is low. Everyone needs to work together. Otherwise, it's like a guaranteed bomb ready to go off.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the recap.
Yeah.
And for all of you out there in my position, go listen to our mindfulness episode. And one caveat, can I just say, why is it that kids, when they're so tired and they're out of energy, when it's bedtime, they find this sudden burst to
Of
do
energy.
anything but go to bed? And it's unbelievable to me. It's just
Yeah.
like clockwork. It's incredible. Like they were literally dragging themselves, having races, dragging themselves around like the island, like the whole entire kitchen,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you're moving an entire body, like pulling them around. How do you have this
Yeah.
much energy? But I know they're like exhausted and tired.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, we want one more, we want more. I didn't get a turn, they got a turn. And then it just really
Yeah.
escalated.
I want to get pulled.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, most of their day, depending on their age, most of their day is structured. And this is like kind of an unaccounted for part of their day.
yeah,
And there's a little bit of rebellion of like, I'm tired of being structured. I just want to mess around a little bit longer.
yeah.
And they're tired, so they lack executive functioning to be like, hold on, it's not a good time. I mean, kids aren't thinking, this is too late for me. I need to go to sleep. They're just like, you put a cookie in front of them. They're like, oh, I'd like to eat that. Oh, you can play right now? Yeah, I'd rather do that than go to sleep.
Hmm.
So don't react to it. Be like, they're kids. You don't want to squeeze out of the fun out of them. You don't want them to think like adults. Adults
Right.
aren't fun usually. Adults worry. Adults usually are too responsible and they want to get back to playing like kids. So just embrace it. Be like, that's good. Good for them. And we need to go to sleep. Okay, one more time. No, 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 that was it. One more time. Tomorrow, let's do it. We'll finish tomorrow night. We'll pause. Let's take a picture of who's on the floor and who's grabbed whose leg. We'll
No, I like
reenact
that.
this
Take a
tomorrow
picture.
night and we'll pick right back up where it is. Right. And all you're doing is just pausing versus shutting it down and shaming someone for being
Right,
silly.
right. So I don't think I gave them consequences or discipline, but maybe I scared with some
That's what we're
consequences.
talking about
But
today.
yeah, I was thinking segue.
Yeah. Oh, good
Get
segue.
on your segue, John.
Yeah.
Here
I
we go.
went to hit so and so in the head, but then I thought,
Now
what's
we're
the best
talking
discipline
about
and consequence?
discipline and consequences.
Yeah, this is so good.
All right.
This is big. I really hope, you might not agree, which is the case every podcast. Like, and I don't even really need you to agree. This works. And is by far the best way to like raise kids and give consequences and discipline. So if you're really ready to be a pretty good parent, listen up.
I
So,
am. I'm ready.
oh yeah, let's do it. I got
Are you
my
talking to
pen.
me?
I'm
Okay.
looking at you.
Okay.
So what are we doing? What are we doing when we discipline and consequence? We are addressing our child's inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate is a broad word, but
Right.
either within your family, either within your culture, your community, your practices, your belief system, that's where appropriate, inappropriate is. We're trying to teach them what's appropriate and be able to identify what's inappropriate. We're not there to make them just feel bad. We're not there to just enforce our control. This is for them to learn how to make good decisions in life so they have a smooth, appropriate, healthy life. And parents forget that because they get wrapped up in moments of disrespect or violation of some rule,
Mm-hmm.
and we forget this is about learning and teaching. Like we want to teach our kids everything we can until they stop listening to us someday. And if we make it a battle of consequences or discipline, we kind of miss the greater goal. So the what behind what we're talking about today is our chance, our privilege as parents, our responsibility and privilege to teach them the ways of the world or the ways that we want them to live that we feel like is better for them,
Mm-hmm.
healthy, rewarding ways to live. So that's the what.
And I'm sure this changes from person to person, right? They all have
Yeah,
their
we can't.
ideals, and
Yeah, it's
we're
important
not
to
making any
highlight.
claims of what is and what
We
isn't
can't do
appropriate,
that. Where
right?
there's too many people with too many different expectations of right or wrong. You need to decide for your own home and your own family what you feel like is right or wrong. The way you do it is what we're going to be talking about
Mhm.
mostly. each family needs to be able to decide. Now, if they were someone who came in my office and we had a family session and they're like, well, we think we should be enforcing these things. What do you think? Well, oh, you're asking me? I don't think you should be doing that because I don't think that's that important. But I don't know what the issues are out there. And I don't want to get into I don't want to say you can't consequence these things and you have to do this. It really depends on the family and the belief system. But if I was privy to what families were evaluating, I would have a more finite or more directed opinion. But in this case, the bigger, broader teaching right from wrong, like, well, don't hit someone. Well, they hit you first. Well, okay, yeah, maybe.
No.
No, never hit. I don't know. Depends. There's a lot of depends in life. And as a parent, you need to be willing to talk about the gray area, especially when it comes to consequences, because as much as you want to think life's black and white, it's not. And you're fooling your kids and you're setting them up for confusion to act like everything's black and white. Like you can never hit someone. Well, what if they've hit you and your friend 5 times in a row? Okay, yeah, you can hit them now, right?
Yeah.
Or do you rat out your friend who just cheated off you, or do you lie? I don't know. That's tough. Like, who's the friend? What's the teacher? What's the situation? How old? Blah blah blah. Is it a
Right.
SAT or is it a random spelling test? So it depends, and you don't want to consequence with the assumption that it's always black and white. You want to help them learn and think critically. And so part of this disciplining process is inspiring them their critical thinking skills. So age appropriate questions. Do you know why that was wrong? Do you know why that was inappropriate? Let's look at how that made so and so feel. What do you see them? So you're encouraging empathy, you're encouraging critical thinking so that the learning goes deeper versus you do that, you lose your toy. Okay, well, I have other toys, so I don't really give a shit.
Hmm.
Versus no, we don't want you to hurt them because I wouldn't want someone to hurt you. And if we all follow these kind of rules, like we live better. So the what is so much deeper than just addressing inappropriate behavior. It's also teaching them to think more critically and more conscientious, and be more considerate of other people.
Right. And then why would we, let's get into the why now. Like, why do we want to
Yeah.
do this?
Well,
And is it an earlier versus later ongoing?
the earlier, the soonest. I mean, I say day one. I mean, in some ways, we're training our kids from day one.
Hmm.
We want them to sleep well. We want them to eat well. Uh, when they have crying fits or something, we want to make sure we take care of it because we'd like them to stop crying. I know that's their only form of communication early on. But I'm a huge proponent of addressing kids' inappropriate behavior. And I say inappropriate, like tantrums or unnecessary crying. What's unnecessary? Like your needs are being met. You need to calm down. I want you to learn to calm down because that's good for you.
Hmm.
It's helpful for me. I'm tired of listening to you.
Self-regulation.
Exactly. Early as possible, right? Whether they're conscious of language or concept. When my kids cried excessively, I addressed it in some way. Like, we need to move. We need to get out of the restaurant. We need to get out of the car. I don't want you to continue to just cry because I don't feel like that's necessary or helpful. If you need something, I'm going to find out what it is and make sure you have it. If not, I need you to learn to calm down. And
Hmm.
we've talked about this before in another podcast, but in de-escalation,
Hmm.
I would take my kids outside if we were inside. The echoing of crying in the house escalates usually. Go
Right.
outside and it's like a big sponge. Like there's no echoing. It's calm. You're likely to hear some animals, some people, and it takes the attention off of like I'm upset for the kid. And it's like, oh, I'm not that big of a deal. Maybe this isn't that big of a deal. So
Hmm.
we really intentionally early on addressed inappropriate behavior, dysregulated behavior, so that they learn early when consequences are light and temporary versus later when consequences are heavy and sometimes permanent, right? So if you're not consequencing kids, addressing inappropriate behavior through conversation, through discipline, through a number of things, they don't learn easily and they learn it difficult in a difficult way later on. And then the consequences get really steep. And worst case scenario, they start to develop a complex.
Hmm.
I'm the bad kid. everyone's out to get me, screw the teacher, screw the principal, screw the police. That comes from a fired up kid that most likely, not in every case, but most likely wasn't disciplined effectively enough early to really adjust. Not that every kid follows the right path that we put out there, uh, but consistent, loving discipline usually shapes kids to handle authority situations appropriately.
Mhm.
Don't do it, you're likely to have a rebel who has more problems. That's going to be a lot more, you have a bigger pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Other reasons.
Well, and I would just say on that, like, you hate to see, like, I've seen that so much in raising our kids with kids in their environment or ecosystem, right? And like you said, they feel those kids have a complex or a stigma to
Black
them,
sheep.
the black sheep. And it's so sad to see when a kid is labeled. There's a kid in a certain sport. I won't like name it exactly, but they called him. Everybody just thinks he cheats, right?
Mm,
And now he's just sort of labeled as the kid that cheats, and I don't know enough about. But it's just sad that now he has this sort of stigma, and it's like, can that just go all the way back to understanding sort of consequences right
yeah,
from wrong? Like, well, you write your score down the way it was, like
yeah.
there's a reason for there's consequences, right? And so, um yeah, so I think it can become a bigger problem than just, "Oh, let Johnny express himself," you know what I mean?
Oh,
I think
yeah.
there's a fine line there,
Let them be
right?
themselves. Let them
You know what I
express
mean?
themselves.
And it's
Yeah, there is a blurry line there of like what's like giving them freedom to be themselves, and what's inappropriate behavior that's actually going to like make their life very difficult.
right.
And I think it's better to go uh, strict early so you can loosen up as they get older versus lenient early, get behind the eight ball, and then try to get strict and really just like put a ton of stress on the relationship in their teenage years. And it
Mhm,
doesn't work very well. Now you're just fighting, you're another adult figure that they're
mhm,
pushing back versus they were conditioned early to yield to authority. Okay, not in a yes sir, yes ma'am kind of way. In some cases, yes, but that's not really the point. It's there are ways of doing life, and adults not always, but usually know better, and it works well to follow it. Like you're a better teammate, you're likely to get promoted on the sports team or in the classroom, and eventually in the workplace when you're a teachable
mhm.
player, when you're a teachable employee, when you're a teachable student. Authority figures like working with you. It's like really simple. So learning how to like listen and obey is better for them. Like they'll get more things.
Mhm.
So teaching that early is a million times easier when you're forming their character and their morality and their decision making and their response system versus that's already in motion and you have some like bitter or kind of some identity on their shoulder of like I'm this kind of kid. That's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Let's spend some time talking about how, because that's really where
Yeah.
it takes form or falls apart. Um, I said earlier, address it as soon as possible. Um, you want to in the context of communicating to your child, I love you. I'm your biggest fan, and because I'm your biggest fan, I want to help you learn these things. So I had one of my coaches in high school. He always said, I mean, maybe this was an excuse because he just yelled like a madman, and this was his excuse to yell. But he said, if I'm not yelling at you, you should be worried because it means I probably have given up hope and I don't care about you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's again a trick so that when he yells at you, you're like, oh, he likes me. But you want them to know I'm only doing this because I want you to be better. I want you to be happy and healthy. And that's why we're addressing this. So within the context of the relationship, that's how you want to give consequences. Don't be the police officer. Don't be
Mhm.
the, legislator. Be the parent who's like, I love you. And I want you to be happy. You're not going to be happy if this behavior continues because you're going to offend people. You're going to break trust. Like you're not going to feel good about yourself. Trust me, like it won't work out. So I'm going to be hard on you now so you learn these things so that your life is actually smoother and healthier. But it should always be within the like package deal of I'm your parent who loves you. This is not me being the adult because I said so.
Mhm.
Don't say shit like that. It's dumb. Sorry for everyone that says it, but it's not intelligent enough.
Right.
Explain why you're saying it. If you can't explain why you're doing it, maybe you shouldn't be doing it because it's not going to teach them,
Mhm.
right? Well, why are you doing that? Because I said so. That's nothing. That's insulting to say, because I care about you and this behavior is going to cause problems. Like it's funny right now. No one's really offended. No one's bleeding.
Right.
But if it were a different context, you'd be in the principal's office. You'd be written up in your workplace. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I'd rather exaggerate now and you get this versus not get it and really have some problems later on in life.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of the why and always challenge my kids to ask me why at any time, right?
Yeah.
And I
And
feel
why
like
is
they've started
that?
to really
And why is that?
grasp on it, right? Well, and it's great because so they have total understanding and clarity of it. And I would say one of my biggest default answers is just because I love you, right?
Oh,
And then they're like, and even if they
combat
think
that.
I'm kind of like screwing around, it's still at least disarming enough where they're like, "Okay, you love me. Okay, but then why is this thing because you love me? Why is that, right?" And
Yeah.
so whether
It's
it's
great.
like bedtime, like, just take the example that I failed at last night. Why do I have to go to bed? Well, because I love you. Well, what does that mean? Well, I love you and I value like you getting sleep and you're growing and you need sleep. And I'm like, science says sleep is the number one biggest factor to longevity and like a healthy life. And I want you to have a healthy life, right? Because I love you. And so it's just for me, it's always really easy to trace it back to that. And then sometimes it's just because I live in like, "Okay, dad," and they'll just do it. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, I would say that would
It's a
be
good
my little
example.
pro tip is just when in doubt,
Yeah.
you can always go with "I love you," and I feel like you can't tell your kids you love them enough anyways, right?
True. And you can, there are a lot of ways to communicate that message too. I think that's a great one. And if everyone just did that, I think we'd all be better off. But just to say, because it means a lot to me,
Mhm.
or because I'm really tired, and when I don't get enough sleep, then I'm grouchy. When I'm grouchy, I don't treat you well, and I want to treat you well, and I want to have a good day tomorrow. So can you work with me? Okay, I'm a huge fan of inviting them to cooperate
Right.
versus telling them they have to. I can't. It's not a absolute like right or wrong strategy, but people do better when they're respectfully invited to do something versus threatened or commanded to do something. And so early on, treat your kids respectfully, even if you feel like their age, let's say, doesn't warrant it. Okay. Because you want to groom them for a respectful relationship. You want them to like expect to be treated respectfully and in reciprocity, treat us respectfully. So
Mhm.
model it. If they're doing something wrong, instead of just getting mad and degrading or attacking, respectfully address it and say, "Hey, let's talk about that. I don't think that's the best way to do it, but I would like to hear your thoughts." And I want them to think critically. Maybe they're not critically thinking. Maybe they're too young or they're too wrapped up into it. Then we want to de-escalate, which we use some of those de-escalation tools, and then go into the learning. This is all about learning. This isn't about consequencing. This isn't about discipline. Those are the ways in which we're bringing about learning. We want our kids to learn so that they're healthy and happy. We want to learn. That's why we're talking about this. That's why people are listening. Don't confuse the situation with anything other than this is a learning opportunity for them, and it's our job to teach them. So within the package of a relationship, within the practice and demeanor of respect, um, don't worry about severity of consequences. Don't be preoccupied with how fair they are to what happened last week with so and so. This is not a law that we're trying to make equal for all parties. This is a case by case example of how we bring about learning. And every kid learns a little differently, just like adults. And so some kids might need a heavy consequence, like an intense grounding or a loss of their favorite thing. Some kids just need a conversation. Don't evaluate the learning, which is what we're achieving, by the severity of the consequence. That might not have any correlation.
Mhm.
Don't evaluate their learning by how fair the consequence is for other kids or how it was
Right.
for you. Like, that's not the point. The point isn't to have the most fair consequences across the board. The goal isn't to have heavy consequences or light consequences. It's to achieve learning. I don't even really consequence my kids anymore. I mean, small things like you're going to lose your screen privileges for the rest of the night
Right.
if you don't put your stuff away right now or something. But they're so nice and compliant. I don't need to do anything. I would if I needed to, but we've done enough. They're 15 and about to be 12. We've done enough over the years where they get it. And if I have to remind them, so what? I'm not going to get mad. I can remind my son a million more times to put his dishes away because he's going to get it. He's gotten better. He'll still forget, but getting mad and then just throwing consequences is so silly. Like, I don't
Mhm.
need to do that. He's getting it. Just remind him nicely.
So let's unpack the whole consequences idea because I'm sure we've all seen lots of parents that will just flippantly throw consequences all the
So
time.
it's
And then
lazy.
and
It's
then you're
lazy
like,
parenting.
you're not backing up that consequence, I guarantee it, right? It's like, I don't know, just something outlandish like, if you don't do that, then you're never having dinner for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Okay, really, you're
Yeah.
not going to feed your kid. But I guess you have any sort of, I don't know, frameworks. I mean, I'm gonna get nerdy here with my process and frameworks
Yeah.
again, but
Well,
any
let
sort of like framework for severity, for lengths, for and making sure you back it up, like
yeah.
any stuff like
It's a
that.
great question. Okay. If the goal is for them to learn,
Right,
we first need to start with what do we want them to learn?
right.
What did they do that was the wrong turn or the wrong decision that we need to address? It's lazy parenting to just throw heavy consequences. We're assuming the consequences are going to do the parenting and the teaching,
Right.
and they oftentimes don't. Sometimes they do, oftentimes they don't. So, uh, the first step is to dig in a little deeper and find out what is the lesson that you want them to learn.
And
Uh,
usually when there's a lesson, I assume there's a why for that lesson, so that probably helps a lot too,
yes, so
explaining the
they
why.
might.
So
So,
here's
hey,
the lesson, here's why.
here's why that was inappropriate.
Right.
Because it looks to like so and so is like you're not being honest.
Mhm.
And you didn't overtly lie, but indirectly it looks like you're lying, and that's going to like affect your relationship with them. And so what's the issue? I want them to be more aware of how they're coming across. And I want to come up with a consequence, and it's got such an unnecessarily heavy. I want them to come up with a response to that to show they're learning it. So
Right.
early on, I asked my kids, "What do you think would be the appropriate way to address this?" I would rather just move right to the solution than sidetrack and detour on consequences, hoping they get the lesson. I'd
Mhm.
rather like move right to, I think you need to apologize to so and so. Now, ideally, I ask them and they identify that, right? I think I need to go say I'm sorry. I think you're right. I think that's good. To me, that's done deal. They achieved what I want them, and that is they learned that that was inappropriate, and they had to do something to like punctuate the lesson learned. They had to
Mhm.
go talk to someone. They had to go write a letter. My daughter just got back from a trip to Catalina, and in fun and giggles, they took this cute boy's picture off the wall who worked there. Bigger deal than they thought because they're like, we only take one picture for the whole summer of the staff. Like, now it's gone, and you've left the island. And so the staff appropriately addressed it. But then I got home like, well, okay, it's funny, and it was also wrong because it messes up their structure. Like, what do you think the right thing to do is? And she had already like figured it out. Like, I'm gonna mail it back tomorrow, and we're gonna write a letter. And I get it. It was funny, but also like messes with their stuff.
Mhm.
It's like great. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Um, but we've done that the whole time. So at 15, it's not a big deal.
Right.
So early and often, and not concerned with consequence, severity, length. It's
Well,
about
and it sounds like
learning.
consequences is really the last resort, right? It's like more just have the conversation,
I could argue that
down to
there's
the
always
learning.
the consequences, even having a conversation
Right.
is the consequence. They have to like do something different than they would have been.
Right.
They're not now they're needing to talk to us.
Yeah.
If it's not us, they got to go talk to their sibling or their friend or their teacher.
So that's like step one, low grade consequences. Let's just talk about this, address it,
Figure out
figure out
where
what
this
you're
the
learning.
misstep was,
Yeah.
and then to make sure they understand what the right step would have been, or the appropriate or the healthy step.
Hmm.
If you're not covering that, now I know this is age adjusted. So when they're 2 or 3, their ability to comprehend and project and forecast these things is obviously limited. But don't wait. Like address early and often and like speak. I've always My wife and I've always been a big fan of speaking beyond their age just slightly so they grow into this concepts versus catering all of our words and messages to what age we think they are. We're not pushing them, we're not inspiring them to be on. So both of our kids are very good communicators because we communicated always beyond where they probably were. They
Hmm.
grew into these words, grew into these concepts. And the same goes with learning. I want you to learn as soon as possible, right and wrong, good or bad, appropriate, inappropriate. Your life's going to be easier.
Hmm.
So you sit down, you have a good conversation, again, age adjusted, ask questions that are appropriate for them to learn and identify the lesson of right or wrong, good or bad, right or wrong, good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. And then throw it back to another question. Okay, it sounds like you've identified what was wrong. It sounds like you've identified what would be a good remedy or a good solution. What's the next step? I want to facilitate critical thinking to ensure they're learning as much as possible. I could throw out every step and make them go do it, but they're way less likely to internalize it and digest it and own it if I'm just giving a blueprint to follow. I
Hmm.
think it's way more effective to have them think that way. They're going to be more empathetic and more conscientious if they're participating in that process.
So then, yeah. So then when do we get to, I guess, what I think of like real consequences? Like, all right, no iPad, no phones, like that stuff.
So my daughter, we found out that she had learned the password for screen time limits.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's been like a week or two. And uh and so I just went and like very casually like sat down and talked to her. I'm like, so it's been brought to our attention that you know the password for screen time limits, and it looks like you've bumped the limits way up or don't even have limits, and you're abusing your screen time privileges. Is that true? Yes, it is true.
Yes, it is.
And we both knew it was true
Guilty
already.
is charged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I want her to own it. There's power
Right.
in her needing to say, yes, that's true. And then I asked her, like, why'd you do that? Because I want to know the reasoning and I want her to know that I understand the reasoning why she did it. She's like, well, I felt like the limits that mom put in there were unreasonable.
Mm.
I said, okay, well, they could be. I don't know. We should talk about it. But do you think uh, going around that by stealing or learning the password is the best way to address it? Well, no. Do you think that we could be reasonable? Do you think I could be reasonable with you if you had a suggestion about screen time privileges? Yes. Okay. Then can you commit in the future to coming and talk to me and we can negotiate and talk about it like maturely versus you doing this deceitful thing? Because the problem here is the deceit. The screen time stuff, sure, like we'll address that, but the deceit and the broken trust
Hmm.
is something we can't afford. Like our relationship, this is where I spent most of the time. Our relationship will not be its best if we don't trust each other. And no matter how small or big it is, it's going to be harder for me to trust you if you're lying to me.
Yeah.
I won't lie to you. I'll tell you exactly what's up. Don't lie to me and we won't have a problem. And she said, I don't think she cried, but it was like emotional and was really powerful. And then we moved to consequences because I felt like she learned it, but she also needs to feel a little bit of the weight to know that just being a nice girl for 10 minutes isn't always going to get you out of it. And so I asked her, I recapped like what she did, and I said, "What do you think the consequences should be?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What do you think you should have to do or not do as a result of lying and
Yeah.
having this, right?" And I don't know if she was playing dumb or she really couldn't think of any ideas, but she stalled for a little bit, which is usually rare. Anytime I've asked kids that in the past, they usually recommend or suggest something even heavier than I would. And most parents will find this to be true. Not every case, but you'll be surprised that their consequences they throw out there are
Or
maybe
worse than
equal
yours.
or heavier than what you would have put out there. Then you get to be the nice person maybe and say, "Oh, okay, we could do that. I was thinking a little bit." And now you're like shrinking it, but you don't have to shrink it. You can go with what they suggest. But another real quick tip is make sure it's reasonable. It's reasonable in severity, it's reasonable in timeliness. It's don't commit to something that grossly encumbers you and your life as the parent because you're likely to not follow through with it, and that's going to be vital for the lesson to be learned is that you do follow through with these consequences. So go back to the story, and she couldn't come up with anything, and I was like, "Well, I think you need to be uh, restricted for 1 week in these apps or whatever." And I made sure she had access to school stuff, but like her social media stuff, I think she could text, but she was cut off from like all of their things,
Mhm.
and she was taken back by it. But I didn't really care because I knew what she did was overtly wrong and inappropriate. I needed her to learn like you can't do that. Like I'm nice and super reasonable, but where you can't tolerate you just flat out lying and doing it until you get caught.
Yeah.
And
At any point in the conversation, did it come up how dumb your password was that she cracked it that easy? Did that come up, Josh?
I think it was her brother
Okay.
who,
He cracked the code.
yeah,
Yeah. They're like, "Oh, mom and dad, what idiots. This is too easy."
good parent. You don't want to pick something that's long and difficult to enact because you're likely to not follow through. It's better to have it short and sweet and nail
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
than to have it be like you're grounded for 6 weeks. Like seriously, no one's going to want to manage that for 6 weeks.
Right.
Do 6 days and make sure you really follow it and then be done. Like kids are they're like dog years. Like a week is like a month
Yeah.
or 2 months. So don't make it long and arduous. You dilute the learning, you dilute the lesson. Now, that doesn't mean we're trying to make it all easy and all feel good. It can be painful, it can be punchy, but short and reasonable so that everyone can like succeed. And then you get forward again, like, all right, let's practice because you want to practice as much as possible before they're out on their own.
Mhm.
A long, drawn out thing isn't a lot of practice. It's just them like suffering the consequences.
Well, and think about ourselves, right? We do stuff like, "Oh, I'm gonna do dry January," or I'm not gonna drink for 2 months or something." And it's like, yeah, that lasted a week, right? Like, you don't want those long drawn out
Yeah,
consequences for
1 year of no
anybody.
drinking.
Yeah.
I'll give you 5 years.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah. Oh.
Be willing, be like, set the example of respecting their opinions, or at least helping them think critically, like what would appropriate consequences be. If you feel like I'm overreacting, I'd love to hear about why, because it's giving me insight about how they think. And then I get a chance to teach and learn again. Like, oh, it's interesting because you thought it wasn't a big deal, but you just straight up lied and didn't think anything of it until you were caught. That's a big deal, whatever it is. That's not the kind of relationship that we have, and that's not going to be tolerated.
Mhm.
You didn't damage anyone's property, you didn't hurt anyone's feelings, but it was a lie. And we need trust as our foundation for our relationship, especially in the years ahead where things get more complicated. You have more
Mhm.
freedom, you have more opportunity, we won't be around. Trust is our foundation that we need to keep intact.
So what do you suggest to parents is using for the barometer for do you get a one-time offense before we're going to come in with consequences or something like that? It's kind of like, hey,
Yeah.
you're 15, you know that we value trust in this family and you broke the trust.
Yeah.
Like, where's that
Well,
sort of
what
line?
I hear you asking for is like systems,
Yes, please.
and yeah, and I'm not going to give you the systems
Oh,
because I want to give you more of a formula that's flexible because every kid learns differently, every
yeah.
home's different, and all circumstances are different. And that's why I want parents to be better and work at being more creative and thoughtful versus being lazy and relying on a system, because inevitably this system falls short and it limits our teaching capabilities. A good teacher, a good coach uh, relies on improv and is willing to like pay attention to the moment. Be like, hold on, wait, stop. I know we've been doing this drill, but it's not working,
Right.
and here's why. We need to switch it up. A system doesn't allow that, right? It's like, well, this is how we do it, and when you're 12, you da 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 da. That could work. I'm not saying that doesn't work. It just isn't as good because it's not as custom and it's not inspiring growth and creativity in the parent or the kid. And so I wouldn't recommend having that, not because it can't work, but because it's likely to be manipulated or it's likely to lose its salt
Mhm.
versus, well, hold on, let's sit down. Well, the formula, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about it, we're going to review what happened, we're going to make sure we understand why you did that, we're going to make sure you understand the appropriate option next time. And then we're going to discuss like how to remedy this. Like, do you need to go apologize, make up, do something to like remedy your offense? You call it a system. I call it more of a formula that allows you some flexibility to gauge severity and timeliness. 5 versus 12, very different. Sibling versus stranger, school versus a museum, like everything's different. And it's just good for us to be challenged to be on our toes and be willing to like dive in, like what's the real violation here and what's the real learning look like. Another quick tip: the older they are, the less time sensitive um, the response is. The
Mhm.
younger they are, the quicker the response needs to be. But when they get a little bit older, so 10, 12, 13, 14, you can actually talk about consequences later that day, or in some cases, the next day. If it's about learning and it's not some emotional like punishment, then the timeline doesn't matter that much. When a young kid is like now punished 2 days ago, or 2 days later from throwing their sippy cup, that's not going to like resonate very well at all. That needs to be like in the moment.
Mhm.
But to a 10-year-old who lied last night, you'd probably talk about it that night, but you could still talk about the next day. The dust has settled, the emotions have lowered. Um, so I'm more about the formula that has flexibility for the parent and requires the parent to do the due diligence of, this is a serious responsibility to teach your kids in new situations over and over. Don't get lazy.
Mhm.
Uh, just achieve learning and make sure that really is resonating and showing up in behavior. A system just generally would limit people and likely to be abused. And then kids just start looking at the chart up there and they start looking to cut corners. It's like, well, if I lie about video games though, I only lose a day. And
Right.
like I'm having a great time. I'm willing to do the day. But they don't know that dad or mom isn't bound to that. And they're like, I don't know. I don't think you're really getting it. I don't know if a day's enough.
Yeah.
Like I know that was the chart, but the whole idea is that you're learning and you're making some progress. I feel like you're just scamming the system here. I feel like we need to disregard the chart and revisit this whole thing. So personally, I wouldn't want to be bound to that. Not surprising to the people that know me. I don't want to be locked down to a system, but because if I want to achieve learning, I want to have full freedom and capabilities to strive for that and not be bound to a predetermined consequence scale.
Yeah. Well, what if you wanna raise robot children, Josh?
Yeah.
Here
Well,
are
I don't
my
have kids.
kids. Here, yep, say hi.
It's
Yeah. Well, and I really like the part about, especially with the older kids, about being able to wait and stuff like that, because I feel like this whole learning consequences situation could really invite shaming for people that like don't do it well,
yeah.
and then, think about a kid who's in middle school, and it'd be easy to sort of like shame them right away in the moment in front
What's
of a
wrong with
friend,
you?
what things like
Yeah.
that.
Or
Versus, let's just wait on this, and then we can talk about it, do it in a more learning way, as opposed to this sort of knee jerk, quick. Let me just shame you in front of everybody, and there you go.
it's easy to do. One
Yeah,
of the notes I wrote down was, it's really good. Hold on here. Uh, you don't want you don't want to use consequences as your emotional regulator.
yeah,
And sometimes we do. I'm mad and I feel like I need to give consequences that equal or balance out my anger. So shaming,
and that pretty much equals shaming. I feel like in that moment.
yeah. But if we're thinking learning,
Hmm.
you don't want to insert any kind of shaming. It's going to complicate learning greatly, significantly. You don't want to put anything else in that space that's going to compromise learning because that's the only real goal.
Hmm.
But when we're unconscious, when we're not mindful parents, we experience an emotion. And now we feel like this strong emotion requires strong action. And then we project that onto our kids without even calculating, is this actually going to like produce what you want to see in them? Are they going to learn from this? Well, they should. And I don't even give a shit because this is just wrong. And I'm tired. We've talked about it 100
Hmm.
times. Oh, it sounds like you're upset
Yeah.
and you want to release your own frustration and tension and call it consequences, but it sounds like you're just using them as a way to get your own stuff out. Do they deserve some rebuttal or approach or consequences? Yeah, but not to be your dumping ground for your own emotion. And that's what unconscious, unmindful parenting turns into, is just this like projection of our own responses onto them. And we have no idea how they're going to receive it, usually poorly.
And shameful, I would say
Almost
both,
always shameful.
almost
The
always.
language is saying, you disappoint me.
Yeah.
Not that behavior disappointed me. You disappoint me. You're a disappointment. That's where the real shaming takes root, is the identification as the person, not the behavior, right? The player who makes a bad play, say, oh, you made a bad play. Well, the worst is I'm a bad player. And when parents shame and coaches shame, teachers shame, it's hard for kids not to internalize that as I am versus that play was bad. I
Hmm.
made the wrong decision here. The worst thing you can do is like, I must be bad because look how they're talking to me.
Hmm.
So, as good parenting, you'd say, I love you. I think you're awesome. This has nothing to do with what I think of you as a person. This behavior, though, was inappropriate, and I just want to be helpful. But we've got to be on top of our game. We've got to have our own shit in order. If not, we say stuff like, what's wrong with you? This is ridiculous. And what's wrong with you is a gigantic message that there is something wrong with the whole kid.
Is
Not
there a worse parenting phrase than "What's wrong with you"? I don't. That might be number one. Yeah.
I've said it.
We'll
I've
throw
said
a
it.
board up for the worst parenting phrases that. Oh, we've all said it.
What's wrong with
So
you?
yeah,
You
just
might as well be like, you're a fucking idiot.
yeah.
But it's like packaged in a question,
Right.
that no one can answer.
Right.
It's horrible. Versus de-escalate ourselves, go regulate ourselves, and then move towards teaching. They need to learn something. You're not a good teacher. You're never a good teacher if you're shaming in any capacity. That's on us. It has nothing to do with them.
Yeah. No. Awesome. Yeah. Do we want to do a quick recap?
Yeah.
All right. Love it. So discipline and consequences. What does that really mean? It means learning, right?
Yes.
So it's really all about learning. What we were addressing, the child's inappropriate behavior, and basically how to learn from that. Um, some of the whys I got, Josh, hold me accountable here. Just learning right from wrong, what's appropriate versus inappropriate, good versus bad, and uh, and how important it is to do this earlier in child development than later, right?
Yeah. And add to what you said, this is about us loving them and having a better life.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're addressing these things. You want them to be healthy and happy. And what behaviors you're teaching is so they can be healthy and happy. It's maybe the most important thing you're going to be doing is correcting when they get out of line so they can move forward more easily.
Mm-hmm. And then how can we do this? Basically, help our kids learn via discipline and consequences. Start with a I love you. I'm your biggest fan. Some great starting points there. Invite them to cooperate with you, right? Um, don't worry about being fair as far as, oh, this is fair in your world or environment. Johnny only got 2 days of screen time, whatever. It has nothing to do with fair. This is about, again, about learning. And then step one is just talking about it, right? So
Yeah.
you don't need to go right into a discipline or a consequence. You first just talk about it and start the learning process.
Follow through. I don't know if I
Right.
said that, but
Really follow through with, yeah,
yeah,
like I
that's
guess
why it's better shorter than
validate,
longer.
get them to validate what they learned, maybe, right? In
Uh,
in that in that
well, what
scenario,
I meant
like what
was
they
the
will.
parent really needs to follow through with whatever the consequence is, make
Right.
sure it happens. What you're saying is make sure they're getting the point and the
Right.
message. So, like, can they regurgitate like why this all happened and what the message or learning is?
Right. So then, and then if at that point you need to dole out consequences, you have some great ideas of first starting with asking them, right? Ask them, well, what do you think would be a good
Yeah,
consequence, right?
what's appropriate, what's fair?
And then just make sure that it's a reasonable one,
Yeah,
right? And just make it short and sweet, so you're not doing the
err on. Yeah, not every time necessarily, but err on. Start with short and sweet, and then grow it if necessary. Versus big and hefty, and then you just end up like cutting in half and diluting it. You're cutting into the learning opportunity. So start small, and you can always add on.
yeah.
Just like be stricter earlier, and you can loosen up as they get older. Versus you wait too long, and then it's like you're trying to wrestle down the I don't know what elephant or
Yeah.
something that's too
Oh,
big.
yeah, I think it's all
The
people
elephant.
wrestle elephants, huh?
It's, it's just your common average Friday
Yeah.
wrestling an
Uh-huh.
elephant
Yeah. I
as a
like that.
kid. Uh,
Great stuff as always,
yeah.
Joshua. I cannot wait to go help my kids learn
Who's ready to
and just
learn? Dad's
consequences for
here.
days. Here we go. No, that really is great. And again, I think what I got out of that is, for me personally, and maybe my wife got out of this, please don't shame your kids during this process. Uh might be a little close to home, that one.
Yeah.
The old, yeah. But
It's
we're
lazy.
we're
It's
learning, yeah.
laziness on our part, right? We need to be more mature and more aware of are we reacting and then just dumping it on them because
Hmm.
that's not healthy or appropriate. So
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Josh.
yeah,
Thank
man.
you, pretty good parent community out there, for being here.
Love that you're here.
Yeah.
Love that you're practicing. Love your feedback. Great questions from you guys. So keep them coming.
Yeah. And again, a like and a share means the world to us. We want to just help anybody and everybody that is willing to just learn a little bit to help their kids, right?
Yeah.
For me, there's really no bigger charge in my life.
Making a
than
better world.
Making a better
One
world.
kid
Yeah.
at a time.
I'm just going to try with 3 kids first.
Yeah. Going for it.
Yeah. So there you go.
Good luck.
Have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.